Okay, the webinar started. I'm just going to give a few minutes for every student to come in, or every attendee to come in. Welcome everyone to the Australian National University webinar series. We'll give it just a few more minutes and then we'll commence the webinar. Okay, so we have attendees roughly around the 30 mark. I might give it one more minute to 4 minutes, 03, and then we'll officially commence. So thank you everyone so far for joining. Okay, I think we're all ready to commence. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you everyone so much for joining ANU's application webinar series. Today will be the ANU application walkthrough webinar, but before we commence, I actually want to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to the elders past and present. So today we have Sam from our ANU admissions team who will be going through the application walkthrough for the next hour, and what we can ask for all the attendees in the Zoom webinar right now. If you do have any questions, any comments, please put it in the Q&A function. We will go through all of the questions right at the end of the webinar and get all of your answers by our team. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Sam from our admissions team to go through the ANU application walkthrough.
Beautiful. Thanks very much, Will, and thanks for that great acknowledgement of country. Just as Will said, I'm going to be sharing my screen today and just giving you guys a bit of a walkthrough of how the application is going to work. Just walking through any of the tougher points or really just providing an overview of how the application is going to look for you when you submit that. And as Will said, just again, a reminder that if anything comes up that you might have a question about, that you want a little bit more clarity for, or I don't cover a concern that you may have, do just put that in the Q&A function. And at the end of the webinar, after I've gone through the application process, we can step back through and have a look through some of those questions. So with that said, I am just going to share my screen very quickly. Hopefully everybody will be able to see this here. So I've just put my screen up there. And what you're looking at right now is just the ANU landing page. So this is where you're going to go, your first step to apply to the ANU. And this is what we're going to be looking at here. So once we get here, we can just scroll down a bit and get to this, tell us about yourself. So this is a little system that we've set up, which is going to guide us to the correct application method for you. So we can just go through here. Obviously, we're looking for undergraduate study. So we can click this, and this is going to bring up the domestic undergraduate applications. So there's a little bit of information here just about how the ANU works and information about some of the ANU programs that you can have a look at here. I really do suggest having a look through and really finding the stuff that that clicks with you and that you know you might want to study at the ANU. So anyway, going down, we're looking here at another little descriptor section where you're either a direct applicant or not a direct applicant. So everybody here should be a direct applicant, and these are applicants who are eligible for the early application method. So this is those who have completed Australian Year 12 studies and will complete Australian Year 12 or November session IB 2023. So these criteria just laid out here. So there's some information here about how to apply and some key dates. For now, you guys can go through these key dates yourself just to really familiarize yourself. But the key one to really pay attention to and make a note of is this application deadline here. So standard applications are going to be closing on the 23rd of May. So just really do make sure that you keep that in mind when you're creating these applications. So anyway, you're here on your ANU apply page. We can just click apply now. And so that's going to take you straight through to our application manager here. Pardon me. And this is just our admissions, scholarship and accommodation application portals. So there's a little bit of application here and some privacy policies. If you're interested, you're more than welcome to read through these. But for our purposes, I'm just going to click apply now. So this is the registration section. So I am just going to use the domestic admissions email address to register here. Now this is the email address that you can contact us on. If you do have any questions after this webinar that might not be answered, you're more than welcome to reach out to us. That email address is there, domestic.admissions@anu.edu.au. You can always find our contact information on the ANU website too. So I'm just going to put in a password here. Just make sure that it's something you can remember. And as well here, there's a small warning. You appear to be using a school email address. So this is just an automated check that the system does, generally with the .edu.au endings here for email addresses. It will pick that up. Now, look, we really do recommend that you use a personal email address for this. I know it might be tempting to use a school email address to keep everything combined, but we have had issues in the past where applicants may lose access to their school email address, and this is just what this warning says here. So look, I really do recommend that you use that personal email address when you register your application. But with that said, we can ignore this warning for this instance just because this is our email address here. This is just another little warning regarding your school email address and the personal email address. Again, in this instance, I'm happy to just ignore that. Cool. So now we're moving into the application itself. So here we have a citizenship question. Now, important to note is that this application portal is for domestic applicants. So if you're not a domestic applicant, if you're a temporary resident, then of course you're going to run into some issues here. I believe this will provide an error if we attempt to select that. In my circumstances, I'm an Australian citizen, so I'm just going to select that. Of course, if you're a permanent resident or a New Zealand citizen, these are still considered domestic students. Just do make sure you select whichever is appropriate for you. So for me, that's Australian citizen. And this is just an eligibility question here. So the Australian Year 12 in 2022. So I'm just going to select yes there, which should be the case for all of you in this webinar at the moment. Moving on, we have a student number and 4-digit PIN question here. Now, a lot of applicants will have a student number and 4-digit PIN, for example, ACT Year 12 applicants and New South Wales HSC applicants. Information here regarding your student might have different student numbers and different PINs. And look, we do have this information here that all other Year 12 applicants, including IB students, should just leave that student number and 4-digit PIN field blank and continue. And I know that does say all other Year 12 applicants, but we do provide the same advice to ACT and New South Wales applicants if you're encountering any issues. If you're having any problems with your PIN or your student number, don't worry about it at this stage. It's better to just kick your application off. You can just leave these blank, tick I'm not a robot, and then hit continue. We do our manual checks, and then we can go through those. So there's no harm if you don't put that in. We can identify you with the information that we receive from the relevant academic board. So that would be BSSS or for the ACT or NISA for New South Wales. So obviously, let's get started. So this is the first personal details information page. If you put in a student ID, a lot of this information is going to be pre-filled. So when you put in a student ID, the system will automatically match you with somebody who has been in the system before and that we have the information for, and will pre-fill all of this first name, surname, date of birth, gender, etc., etc. If you do notice that any of this information is incorrect, all we need to do is just shoot me through an email at the domestic.admissions email address, and we can look into that a little bit further. So generally what that is a mismatch in data with what we have received from the education board. It's just a little bit of back-end work for us. So if you do notice a mismatch, just make sure you do send us an email. So I'm just going to start filling this in. It is not too difficult at all. So obviously I'm putting in test application. You can just put in your name. So I'm just going to continue here. And then obviously the country of citizenship should match what you included on that first page. So whether that's Australian citizen or permanent resident or anything like that. So you do have all these options here. I'm just going to go with the simplest, which is Australia and territories. Obviously you would include whichever is relevant for you. Now we come to the first question that I just want to draw your attention to. So this one here, do you want to authorize a person to act on your behalf? Now I want to be very clear that there's no obligation to say yes here. However, if you don't put anybody's name here, then we won't be able to speak with your application with anybody except for you. So if your parents call us, for example, asking information, let's say maybe you're at school and a deadline is coming up and you ask your parents to make a call on your behalf, if you haven't selected yes here and put their names in, we won't be able to speak with them. So I want to make very clear that when you're going through your application and when you're putting this information in, you do include any details of an authorized person you want to be able to speak with us regarding your application. So I'm going to tick no here for this one. But if you do tick yes, just please make sure that you do put their full name and information here. That is quite important. So if you've ever studied at the ANU before, you can put your ANU ID here. This is generally only relevant to students who have done the ANU extension program. Moving on, we have our personal email address. This can be different from the one that you've registered with. It's just important to note that this is the email address that you will be contacted on. So if we need any further documentation, if we need anything further from you to progress your application, this is the email address that we are going to contact. So what we're going to need from you is to make sure that this is an email address you can check, and this is an email address that you can receive emails to, including into next year. So again, we have that issue with the school email address. For these purposes, I'm going to leave this as domestic.admissions. Now we have our phone number here. I'm just going to put 61255579. And then we have our residential address here. So for this one, I'm just going to put in building 154, Diredale. And if you do have any issues, your address isn't found like this one, you can enter it here. So this is just the student administration building. So this is where I am, building 154 University Avenue. That's the Diredale building on ANU campus. If anybody comes for any kind of tours or anything, if those are available in 2022, you'll be able to see this building on campus. So in Acton, in the ACT, and then obviously the postcode is 2601. So you can just fill in your address there. Now we have some government reporting questions. So do you speak a language other than English? Do you identify as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander? The highest level of school attained. So these ones are generally going to be year 11 in this early application portal, just because you haven't attained your year 12 yet. So for now, it should just be sitting at year 11. So now you have your parent and guardian details. So just fill in here whatever is relevant for you. Obviously, the Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander identification is not a compulsory question, but we do recommend that you do indicate this. Cool. Moving on, we have, do we need any support services during your study? This is anything that may require assistance. So our access and inclusion team is very supportive of any kind of things. We have a variety of available measures here, and a lot of this information is detailed here. And something that I really want to make sure is clear regarding this support is that any information entered is not going to affect the outcome of your application. So this isn't an equity application. This isn't going to assist your application, nor is it going to hinder your application. So I would definitely recommend inputting anything that you may need assistance with here. It's not going to affect the academic assessment at all. It's just something that if you do receive admission, it's something that we're going to use to provide any kind of assistance to you. So I'm going to tick no for this. I would recommend ticking yes here to be to authorize to be contacted with other study options. So this is just other pathway options or similar. And especially important here is that if you don't list a preference that you're eligible for, we might provide a slip back to you. So I think this is quite useful, but of course, that's always your decision. Again here, this is another important question, the Tuckwell Scholarship. So this is one that might be easy to miss and overlook. The Tuckwell Scholarship is a rather prestigious and quite valuable scholarship at the ANU. Something important to note with the Tuckwell Scholarship is that if you do intend to apply for it, the application deadline is different. So we do need applications for the Tuckwell Scholarship to be completed by the 6th of April. So if you do intend to apply for the Tuckwell Scholarship, just please do remember to submit your application before the 6th of April. Information regarding the Tuckwell Scholarship is also provided here. So I welcome you spending the time to read through this, but it's as simple as ticking yes, and then you'll be emailed with further information at a later date regarding Tuckwell questionnaires, eligibility statements, all this kind of information. For simplicity's sake, I'm going to tick no. It shouldn't affect anything else in this application. Cool. So that's the personal information section. Let us move on after we have filled in the errors. Perfect. That should be fine now. Okay. Beautiful. And so now, once you've completed your personal information section, I strongly recommend that you write this number down. Please, please keep a record of this. If you want to ask us any questions regarding your application, if you want to log in, if you want to effectively do anything, this application number is going to be absolutely crucial. So this application number is what is going to be able to help us identify your application and is effectively the identifying number for this. So once you receive this application number, write it down, take a screenshot, whatever you need to do to make sure that you do remember this application number. Okay, moving on, we're going into our adjustment factors section. Now, here we have the different sections and different types of adjustment factors. So we have performer adjustments, we have elite athlete adjustments, and then of course we have equity adjustments. So for more information regarding this, and I'm just going to open up some web pages, what I'm going to Google now is ANU National Access Scheme. So this is a lot of information regarding our adjustment factors. And we'll see as we go through this application process, there are a lot of really, really useful web pages that you can go to just from a quick Google search. So for example, here we can see all of our equity adjustments we have here and our subject adjustments that we have here and more information about them. So in this case, let's go back to our application. We can see that there are performer adjustments here. Now we can see that the performer adjustments are the music AMEB grade 8. And then it provides the information here, the marks required for subject-based adjustment for the AMEB grade 8 is successful completion. Cool. So let's say we did successfully complete the AMEB grade 8. We can tick yes here. We can write in the instrument that we've completed and we can hit save. Perfect. Now we've just indicated that we should be receiving or we have applied for performer adjustments. It's as simple as that. Then we require documentation. For performer adjustments, we require documentation to be that certificate of completion. So there should be a certificate that just says that you have completed a AMEB grade 8. You can just click upload here, and then you can just upload any kind of a file. It should be very simple. Now, elite athlete. Again, I'm just going to look up the elite athlete, and the one that we want for the application process is the Elite Athlete Friendly University Scheme. Now, this one here is, again, a lot of information and very, very helpful. But the information is here, how to apply, applicants applying directly. Generally, we can follow the prompts, but there's also guidance here. So commitment, a statement outlining the commitments during year 11 and 12, a statement from the coach or National Sporting Institute, and a letter from the school office in support of that adjustment. So pretty simple, but we can tick yes here too. And then we are just accepting that you're an elite athlete. And then we have a bit more information here. So these are just the statements that I was talking about and those prompts. So we can say sporting individual. So we played tennis. And then the highest level, let's say we played at the national level. Now we have information here. So the number of hours per week, the number of days absent from year 11, and the number of days you expect to be absent from year 12 due to training. So we can just put in generic numbers here, but try and be as accurate as possible as you can. And generally, these things are going to need to be corroborated by the statements that you upload, the statement from your coach and the statement from your school. So I'm going to tick no here. This is an institute or academy of sport, for example, the AIS. But if you did tick yes, there is going to be just more information regarding that academy. Cool. So I've just saved that now. Now we have here the Elite Athlete cover sheet. You can just click this and then it will prompt you to download that. We then need you to upload that cover sheet after it's been completed. And we'd also like you to upload those statements from your coach as well as from your school, just corroborating those days of school that you've missed and that the amount of hours you've had committed to the activity, just so we can gauge the level of adjustment we would like to provide based on that elite sport. Now, moving on, we have equity adjustments here. So these are various things that may have impacted you through your schooling. You have not had direct control over. So this is like disrupted schooling due to illness, distance education, stuff like that, financial hardship. We have a pretty broad group of categories here. Now we have a little guidance on each of them if you click the question mark, and it also guides you to this National Access Scheme webpage. This is really the best place to go. It provides more details really about what each category is. And specifically here, it links you to the UAC webpage for educational access. This, if we go to the categories of disadvantage and required documents, it just gives a little bit more information about what documents are actually required. But let's go in here and say financial hardship, and we can say that potentially a parent or guardian received JobKeeper payments. We can just click save there, and then this has been uploaded. Again, there's another little download button here that says JobKeeper allowance. That's the statement that we need you to provide. You can fill that out and then click the upload button, which is just here. And then that should be assessed with your application. The reason why we can see here, the AMEB has its own individual upload button, whereas the equity adjustments have a separate upload button, is because we take the equity assessment as a whole. So even if you don't apply for something, if you upload documents that may be eligible for that adjustment, you're still going to be considered for that adjustment, regardless of whether you applied for it. So we look at that holistic assessment when it comes to your equity and try and provide the best outcome we can for you. So again, this is your adjustment factors page. With that said, let's move on. All right, so the next step of your application is the co-curricular or service activities. So we can see here that the system has automatically picked up 2 co-curricular activities from the previous section. So we indicated that we had an AMEB qualification as well as the elite athlete. So this has already picked that up and has automatically added those co-curricular requirements. If we wanted to add a new activity, we just click on the add activity button. I'll just go back very quickly. We just click on this add a new activity button. Click on that, and we would select a category. We've got a pretty broad range of categories, but this might be a little bit confusing for you if you're just looking at it. So my recommendation is to click on this button here to go to the ANU website, pardon me, and that's going to take you to the co-curricular or service requirement webpage. Again, this is a really, really useful resource, which has some key dates on the side here, and then also lists all of our information regarding co-curricular requirements. I would very much recommend reading through this. But for our purposes, we can just have a look at these reference documents on the side here, which are very important. We can have a look at the co-curricular schedule. Now, this is our co-curricular schedule. So these are our broad categories of groups. So here we can see we're trying to select a category. Now, what are these categories? Well, they're listed here. We have community and service activities, employment, creative and performance activities. These are what we call our broad groups. They're the general categories that an activity may fall into. So in this case, let's say I participated in an educational test. I participated in a maths Olympiad. So how do we add that? Well, I'd look to the broad category, educational and scholastic activities. Cool, so that's the category that we're in. So I'm going to click educational and scholastic activities. From there, it's a maths Olympiad. So that's an individual educational competition, test, or challenge. which is this section just here. And I can even see this here, includes all national Olympiads in the examples. Cool. So I want to select an activity description, and it's the educational competition test or challenge individual, and then a sub-activity, which is just the example. So in this case, it's the Maths Olympiads, which is just, yeah. So I'm just going to include national Olympiads. If you can't find your category here, as always not listed above, and if you can't find your activity or description here, you can always click other activities too. Cool. So here you need to confirm that you meet the commitment requirements. Now the question might be, okay, well, what are the commitment requirements? Again, we need to check our schedule. So this is your go-to place for information regarding the co-curricular requirement. We can see here that the commitment requirements for 2023 for the educational competition test or challenge is just participation. So all I need is to have participated in Maths Olympiad, and then that's sufficient. Perfect. So I've participated in this, so I'm confirming that, and I understand that I need to schedule. Cool. So I'm just saving this now, and there's over 6 months. So really important to note is that in the statement that would be provided that you would upload to us, we need actual confirmation that you have completed 30 hours in 6 months. Just saying that you have worked in a place since, let's say, March 2021 is not going to be sufficient. We actually need confirmation of those 30 hours. So if the commitment requirement does list that there's an hour requirement, we need specific confirmation of those hours. Cool. So this has been uploaded. Now we can see here, based on the information you've provided, you appear to have met the co-curricular or service requirement. This is subject to final assessment. So what does meeting the co-curricular or service requirement mean? Well, we're looking for 2 out of our 7 identified skills. So we have our identified skills across here. So these are community engagement, inclusion and awareness of diversity, communication, etc., etc. We need you to meet 2 out of 7 of these skills. And so we know that the educational competition test or challenge provides 3 out of 7. And so that should be sufficient to meet our requirements, our co-curricular requirements. Now, again, this is subject to final assessment. So if we determine the documentation is not sufficient, for example, like in the example I gave before, if the hours are not stated, that might not be sufficient. So we might not be able to approve the co-curricular requirement in your case, if those documents haven't been provided. This is just an indication that if these activities are approved, then you should have met the requirements. It is still key to note that this is subject to final assessment. Now, for more information regarding the co-curricular requirement, again, going to the ANU webpage for it is very, very helpful. And again, there are some examples here, and there's also a documentation template. So this template is the ANU statement. We would recommend, in most cases, providing this document to meet the co-curricular requirement. However, we do accept other kinds of documents. And so there are some examples listed on our webpage, and I have them here. So this is an example that we may accept. We have the coach's name, who they are, their contact details, and then just confirmation of the activity and the participation. This is something that we would accept. There are others here which are listed, some more official, some less official, but if your document is in a similar style to these ones, that would likely be accepted. So for example, here is a certificate of participation from the Tournament of Minds. With that said, the exact documentation requirements are listed here. And that is that we need the document to identify you by your full name as having participated in the co-curricular or service activity, provide the full name, signature, and contact details of a person who can verify your participation. The document needs to also identify the activity by name and identify the dates and potentially hours you were engaged in that activity. So definitely do refer to this webpage. This is a lot of help, and these documentations and templates on the side here are very, very handy. All right, moving on, we can go to the next section of this page of the application, which is just the qualifications section. So here we have three options: Year 12 studies, English language proficiency, and Year 11 studies. Most of the time, English language proficiency isn't going to be required. For example, Australian citizens won't need to provide anything in this regard. Citizens who have undertaken secondary study meet our English language requirements automatically. But if you're a permanent resident or a humanitarian visa resident, you may need to provide an English language test or something similar. What you can do is just check our English language policy on our webpage for more information regarding that. But as a general rule, you shouldn't need to worry about this. All right, so we can add a new secondary qualification here. So I'm just going to add Australian Year 12, the Year 12 exam type. So there's a little bit of information here regarding that. So in this case, I'm going to indicate that we went through school in the ACT. So I'm just going to click ACT Year 12. I'm going to search the school here. In this case, I'm going to search Dixon College, which is one of the Year 12 schools here in the ACT. And then it's going to autofill this information. So this is your best bet for identifying your school. You should just be able to autofill the information. If it doesn't autofill, you can manually provide the results, manually provide the name and the information regarding it, and we can look that up. If we do need anything further, we always contact you for more information. You have your student number here. You can add that if it's known. If it's not known, again, just leave that blank. Now, there's also this question here. Did you study Year 11 at this school? This is going to automatically add a Year 11 qualification if you did study Year 11. I'm going to tick yes and hit submit. So we can see now it's added Year 12 studies at Dixon College and also Year 11 studies at Dixon College. So these are optional documents because it's an ACT Year 12. The ANU can automatically retrieve results from New South Wales and ACT applicants. However, if this were a Victorian, Western Australian, Queensland, anything except for ACT or New South Wales, we would require a supplementary assessment. Now, we can see here, and I've just clicked on this button here, you must upload a copy of your Year 11 results. I've just clicked that. Now this brings us to a Year 11 results form. Now we have here applicant name, student ID, and then if we come down here, we can see that there is academic information here. So all we need, and this is to help us generate an ANU selection rank when we're conducting the assessments. This is how we issue early offers. We generate a selection rank on this basis and then go from there. We do need you to provide the subject name, what unit it is, if it's a semester 1 or semester 2 result, and then whether it's an ATAR subject. ATAR subject means exclusively if it's going to count towards your ATAR. So you can talk to your careers advisors about that, whether this subject that you're writing into the form is going to count towards your ATAR. If it is, you can tick yes. If it's not, you can tick no. If you're not sure, feel free to leave it blank. It's generally not going to impact your application. If it does, we'll contact you for further information. So we need this to be signed off by a representative from the school. This information is just here. So we do need this to be signed off. But for all applicants outside of New South Wales and ACT, this is the format that we need your Year 11 results to be provided in. Now, there's also explanatory notes here. This is the conversions. We need it in one of these formats. Now, this is very, very important. We're not going to be able to accept it if it is not in one of these formats. So really crucial is that you ask your careers advisors or your teachers, whoever is filling out this form, to make sure that it's filled out in one of the formats listed. Cool. With that said, and you've uploaded a copy of your Year 11 results, we also would want an applicant to upload copies of their Year 12 enrollment. So that Year 12 enrollment is really just going to provide us information regarding prerequisite requirements, which is something that I'm going to move on to in the next section in programs. So let's move on. Programs. This is how you select what you want to study. Now, before I showed you right at the start where you can have a look through our programs and what you might want to study, this is where you add it. So everything here is going to be for semester 1. You can always defer to semester 2 when you receive your final offer. But let's just select a couple of programs. So I'm going to select here the Bachelor of Arts as a standard program. I'm also going to select the Bachelor of Health Science and the flexible double of law. Cool. This is going to give us a pretty broad look at the different types of programs that we have. So I'm just going to go back to our program preferences here. Perfect. So I just selected 3 programs and I just clicked select semester 1. And then it's going to list the 3 programs here. And it's listed in the order that I selected. I can just drag and drop and just hit save changes. And that should one problem here, and that's our flexible double degree. So in that. So I'm just going to select law study options here. So we can select one from the laws group, so Bachelor of Laws, and then the ANU flexible double study options. We've got a huge amount of options here. You can pick whatever you want to study laws with. For the purposes of this, I'm just going to select mathematical sciences and click update. Perfect. Now we have 2 warnings. We have the first one. The Bachelor of Health Science has mandatory additional requirements. Some of our programs have these, for example, health science, for example, visual arts, for example, design. These are selection criteria, potential interviews, portfolios, various things like that. So in this case, for additional selection criteria, you can go through here to the additional selection criteria page and click on the one that's relevant for you. In this case, health science. This is going to provide you a detailed description of exactly what you need to do and when you need to do it for the Bachelor of Health Science. So really crucial that you do pay attention to these warnings as they come up. That being said, we can see here, because we selected the Bachelor of Mathematical Sciences for our second preference, that brings up a second warning, which is a prerequisite requirement. So this is a program-specific requirement. In this case, a certain level of Year 12 math study is prerequisite for the Bachelor of Mathematical Sciences. That information can be found in here. You can just search for mathematical sciences and then have a look, and it's going to show you what those prerequisite requirements are. In this case, what we would need to prove that and to show that you do have that level of Year 12 math study is uploading your Year 12 enrollment information. And you would just do that in the Qualifications section under Year 12. And thirdly, we have our Bachelor of Arts, which is a standard program at the ANU. There are no additional requirements there. You can see that there are no warnings. Perfect. So now I do recommend that you include 5 preferences and that your first preference is what you want to study most. But we are happy with 3 in this case, so we can move on. Now we have a scholarships question. Do you wish to apply for eligible scholarships? This is as simple as ticking yes and hitting next. And that's all you need to do for scholarships. That will automatically consider you based on the information you've provided throughout your application. It will automatically consider you for any scholarship that you might be eligible for. All right, now we have accommodation. So if you're coming from interstate, it's likely you're going to want to apply for accommodation. We do have a first year undergraduate accommodation guarantee. So if you do tick yes here, we guarantee that we're going to provide you an accommodation option. We can't guarantee that we can provide you what you have requested, but we will try and provide something as close as possible to what you've requested. So we have three options, and a lot of this will be covered in the accommodation webinars, and you'll be able to really select what is good for you. Because I'm in admissions, I'm not going to be able to help with specific accommodation information and which hall or which college might be the right one for you. That is definitely a question that I'd recommend sending to accommodation. But for the purposes of the application, you can select catered, self-catered, or flexi-catered. In this case, I'm going to select flexi-catered, and then we can select our residence. So this is just going to provide some information about that residence, the fees of that residence, and various other things. Now, do you have any medical, dietary, or special requirements? Again, this isn't going to affect the assessment of your application, so definitely do declare this if you have anything here. There's just an acknowledgement there, and then an emergency contact. So you can fill out an emergency contact here. For this case, I'm not going to fill it out for the sake of time, but do definitely try and fill out somebody who can be there and who can come quickly if need be. In this case, to save us from filling that out, I'm just going to tick no. I don't want to be considered for accommodation. Cool. Now we're reaching the end of our application. So I'm just going to hit next now. And now we have here our application status. So you can leave it at this submit stage. It's going to remember everything. The information has been saved. It's going to remain here at the submit stage until you decide to move on. So we have here the application number that was provided at the start. Again, please do make sure that you write this down and you have this on record. And then please make sure that you double check everything, that you read through all the information here and everything is correct, particularly personal information. It might not be possible to change this information after you've submitted it without coming to us. So with that being said, you can review everything here. And then once you're happy that this is how you want your application to look, you can hit submit. There's a declaration here, which I definitely do recommend reading through. Once you've read through that, you can click I have read it and then hit submit application. Beautiful. Now your application is submitted. Now that it's submitted, it's going to be assessed. We'll contact you if we need anything further. And with that said, we can go back into manage your application. And then this is the application landing page. Now you might have noticed that we didn't upload any documentation to a lot of those sections. And the application system didn't stop us from submitting, even though we didn't provide documents. Now that was as intended, because you can always come back and upload documents at a later stage. So here we can see that our document upload is still here. We can see that our, if we go to our program preferences, all of our warnings are still here. And if we go to our co-curricular information, we can still upload additional documents. So our recommendation is always to submit the application as soon as possible, really, and then provide documentation when you receive it. The documentation deadline is a later date than the actual application deadline. So I definitely do recommend submitting, even if you may not have the documentation on hand. If you can receive it later, you can submit it later. With that being said, we'll move into questions and answers now. I can see a couple of people have put through some questions. Will, I'm sure you've been having a look through those. So happy for you to manage that and read them out to me. And I'll
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sam, for the presentation. Very thorough and very informative. And we hope all the students attending found that useful so far. And I will get on top of the questions. And Sam, I did bring something up because I think it was very important. And I think the video just cut out at the time you were explaining it.
Sure.
But it's actually the part about the student number and the PIN, which is actually also a question. And just to help prompt this section again, I did bring this particular pop up one more time. Can you see that one?
Yeah, I can see that one there.
Can you just go through the spiel again and what students need to be aware of in this particular section? Because I think a lot of the questions students did get to this section and somewhat stuck. So what for ACT New South Wales students, what it means for them and what it means for the interstate students as well.
Yeah, for sure. So the student number and PIN is something that we use for New South Wales and ACT students. It's just an automated link to make things easier for us. So the information here is that the PIN is the first 4 digits of your date of birth. And then obviously there's an example there. So if your date of birth is 03/10/94, then your PIN is 0310. Now we do recommend that for New South Wales and ACT students, but if you're having any issues with it, don't let it hold you up. It's not a mandatory requirement. We can still identify you and find your student results without that student number and PIN. So give it a shot if you're a New South Wales or ACT applicant, but don't stress if it's not something that you can provide. If it's something you don't know or you're getting errors, you can just leave it blank and continue, and then we can manually identify you. So like I said, give it a try for New South Wales and ACT applicants, but any issues, just don't worry about it and leave it blank. And then for all other Year 12 applicants, so all interstate non-New South Wales ACT and all IB students, please just leave it blank and continue.
Wonderful. Perfect. Thank you so much, Sam. I knew that some of the questions flowed in at that section before the video halted itself. So thank you. I'll stop sharing the screen and we'll take this moment to actually go through some of the Q&As at the moment. So one of the first questions was in relation to co-curricular service. And if a voluntary activity only happens once a year and you can only volunteer once a year, does that mean can you or cannot include it in your application? Do you have any idea on?
So if a voluntary activity only happens once a year and you can only volunteer once a year, does that mean you cannot include it in your application? Look, it would depend on the length of the activity. We do require, I believe 15 hours off the top of my head is what we require for volunteering. So what that means is that if that once a year activity happens and you participate for more than 15 hours, so it's over multiple days and you do 5 hours a day, let's say, and you do 3 days, 5 hours a day, then that would be sufficient. But if it's only for one day and you only do 5 hours on that day, then that in and of itself would not be sufficient. We do accept multiple volunteering activities. So for example, you could volunteer with Lifeline for one activity for 5 hours and then volunteer somewhere else for 10 hours and then combine those in the same activity. And that would be sufficient. But if that one activity doesn't meet the 15-hour requirement that's listed on our schedule, then unfortunately, no, we wouldn't be able to accept that qualification.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sam. And hopefully the person who answered or asked the question, hopefully that was a good answer for you as well. Next question is I applied and under the courses I've selected, it says results pending English language requirements. I'm an Australian citizen. Does this mean I need proof of my language proficiency?
Shouldn't need to. So when it says results pending, it is generally a standard check. So the way that the system is structured is that we have a country of birth check. So if the country of birth is from a non-Group A country, in this case, it is a Group A country, are generally English-speaking countries. We have the list of those countries listed on our webpage. So it will pick you up and manually refer it to the admissions office. that is just a matter of a manual review, which is going to happen later in the year. So if you're an Australian citizen, I definitely wouldn't worry about it. But if you would like that specific confirmation for your specific circumstances, you're more than welcome to send through an email to domestic.admissions, and we can manually review your application and just let you know that there's nothing to worry about.
Wonderful, Sam. Thank you so much for that. Next question we have is from Jasmine. Can we put more than 5 co-curricular activities in? Now, my understanding is that 5 activities is the most that we'll ask for. Is that the correct understanding as well, Sam?
Yeah, that's 100% correct. So we do have a limitation of 5 activities and 5 documents per activity. So that's our limitation. Look, I want to be very clear when it comes to the co-curricular requirement that it is a threshold requirement and not a supplementary requirement. So once you have met those 2 out of 7 skills, your application is then going to be considered after you've met those 2 out of 7 skills. Meeting more than 2 out of 7 is not going to supplement or provide a benefit to your selection rank or anything like that. So I wouldn't worry, if you meet the requirements with 1 activity, I would recommend only using 1 activity to keep your application as simple as possible and to worry less about the documentation requirements. But if you do want to include a couple more, just to cover your bases to make sure that there's no issue, you're welcome to, up to a maximum of 5.
Amazing. Thank you, Sam. We've got a few more minutes left for Q&A. And one of the questions, which is a great question, how would we order program preferences for double degrees? I'm assuming this refers to the flexible double degree groupings, but what can you offer in this area, Sam?
Yeah, look, I'm not 100% sure really what we're going for here.
Yeah.
But if you want to apply for a flexible double degree, you just need to include the shell program. So we have the 3 shell programs: the flexible double law, which is law plus another program; flexible double of arts and social sciences, which is our arts and social sciences group; and then the flexible double engineering or advanced computing. So it's really a matter of what you want to study. If you do want to study a double degree, then definitely put that as your first preference and then have other preferences below that. But if you don't want to study a double degree, then there's no obligation to put it as a first preference. You can include that second preference. I hope that helps. Another important thing to note with the double degree preferences is that the final selection happens at the offer stage. So include your preference indications, and I did that with that flexible double degree law while I was going through the application, but you can change those selections at a later stage. So in January, when you're accepting your final offer, you will be able to change those selections. So don't consider it a lock-in at the moment. That happens later.
Beautiful. Thank you, Sam. Appreciate it. Okay, 4 more questions. We'll see if we can go through this quickly. How are subject adjustments applied? Specific levels, maths rather. Yep.
So subject adjustments are a specific level of performance in a year 12 subject. So that means that we won't be able to apply subject adjustments until year 12 results are released later in the year. Those are applied automatically. So we retrieve your results from the education board, and year 12 results will happen from each board. So you don't need to provide anything to us, and we'll automatically identify you and automatically apply those adjustments.
Beautiful. Wonderful, Sam. Thank you. If multiple co-curriculars under the same category are done, how do we clarify this? Multiple instruments, multiple bands, or that's a wonderful initiative. But yeah, how would they clarify that?
Yeah, so exactly the same way. There is no limitation to being able to add the same category multiple times. You can just add it as a new category. But keep in mind that, there is a maximum of 5 categories. But with that being said, you can just add a new category in the same, in the same classification.
Beautiful. Thank you. Okay, hopefully we're wrapping this up very soon. You need to show evidence of your level of maths study for some course applications.
Yep, that's right. So some course applications, the Bachelor of Mathematical Sciences was the one that I used. do require a level of maths study. So for example, engineering, advanced computing, IT, statistics, actuarial studies, mathematical studies, these are all things that require a level of maths. And we do view that through your year 12 enrollments at this stage. So definitely do provide those year 12 enrollments and check our programs and courses webpage, whether the programs that you're applying for have those math prerequisite requirements.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sam. Last two questions. We'll address these, just these final two questions as they came in before 5 p.m. I'm having trouble with my student number and PIN as a New South Wales student, and it's saying that it's incorrect. Am I able to leave this blank?
Yep, definitely leave that blank. Again, if you're having any issues with that, we can manually identify you. Just leave it blank.
Yep, wonderful. Last question. If we choose to tick the eligible scholarship box, will we need to submit additional applications later if scholarships are found?
Look, that's a question that I might direct to the scholarships team. My understanding is that there is generally not additional applications. We're trying to make it as streamlined as possible. You should just be identified as eligible and then provided a scholarship option. Obviously, the Tuckwell Scholarship is different in that regard. The Tuckwell Scholarship does have a separate application process. But for standard ANU scholarships, not including Tuckwell, my understanding is that there shouldn't be another application. But for confirmation of that, I would definitely recommend reaching out to the coursework scholarships team.
Wonderful, Sam. Thank you. And I believe as part of our webinar series, the next webinar we actually have is the actual scholarships team, 16th of March, for those students who want to be involved with the scholarships webinar. 16th of March, same time, 4 to 5 p.m. You'll be able to have your questions answered about that particular scholarships section. So that concludes our presentation and webinar for the application walkthrough. Thank you so much, Sam, and on behalf of the admissions team for representing them. Thank you so much for providing a very thorough and informative walkthrough, and to every single student or attendee who's watching this webinar. We hope you found that very valuable and useful. Do feel free to get in contact with us with the admission teams or the future students team if you had any further questions. And please also tune into one of our upcoming webinars. We have one every single week, right up until the final week of our direct application process. Thank you, everyone. That concludes the webinar. I will stop the recording now, and we hope everyone has a good day.